I believe Don and Dorr, two of our best topographers during the war. He's sitting in the middle of this picture, Frederick Dorr. Okay, this is John Don, co-surveyor, same guy that you see there, in about 1875 there. And I believe this is Frederick Dorr, who's seemed to be a great big guy. The guy in the Cape, officer next to them, I believe is William Palmer, who was the head of topographers on the Peninsula Campaign until he died of disease. But he'd been the assistant in charge of the Coast Survey office for about 5 years before the Civil War. Map of Chickamauga. This was the battle that was fought before the Union Army retreated to Chattanooga. You've heard of George Thomas, the Rock at Chickamauga. Actually, a Captain C.H. Boyd of the Coast Survey produced this map after action. He wasn't with Thomas during the particular battle, but because he made this map and was so good, he became the chief engineer of Chickamauga Battlefield National Park following the Civil War. Dorr and Don, once again, they worked at Chattanooga together as a team. This is the short guy on the left, I believe, is Don, and the big guy in the middle, I believe, is Frederick Dorr, and probably a boy helper of some sort. But anyway, this survey signal built at Chattanooga. And this is the map that was produced that accompanied after action, but they were producing this map under combat conditions. This accompanied Grant's report on the taking of Chattanooga after the battle. So Grant's victory at Chattanooga sounded the death knell of the Confederacy. Chattanooga was a battle fought based on topography, and the Coast Survey was instrumental in producing much of this map under combat conditions. This is the credits published at the U.S. Coast Survey Office from surveys made under the direction of Brigadier General William F. Smith, by Captains F.W. Dorr and J.W. Don, U.S. Coast Survey, then a few Army guys, and then at the end, this is sort of interesting, and information relative to the battles furnished by Captain Preston C.F. West, U.S. Coast Survey. For special ops, West was probably the first guy. I mean, this guy, he rode around the Confederate Army by himself at Gettysburg. He was on his way and reported in to meet at Gettysburg. J.B. Stewart rode around the Union Army, but had what do you call it, 1,000 guys with him, or how many, I don't know. But anyway, he was like a special forces guy. Okay, this is just a book written by at the I think Library of Congress. But the bottom part of it, the clarity and correctness of the location of both Union and Confederate fortifications, entrenchments, and troop deployment gives it a unique place among military maps of the period. In other words, it's one of the best maps that was made during the Civil War. Just a map, just once again, the continental nature of the war. This is down in New Iberia, western southwest Louisiana, produced by John Oltmans, that we've seen a little bit of earlier. In November of 1863. Then reconnaissance of Petersburg, Virginia. I'm not sure this is a Coast Survey map, but you can actually, well, I don't know if you can see the roads here or not. Okay, this is Halifax Street, which is Halifax Street here. Highway 1 going to the west is actually Washington Street up here. So actually you can look at this modern map, came off of Google Maps, compare it to this Civil War map, and Petersburg, Virginia looks almost the same today as it did 150 years ago. And this is the final map by Oltmans. He went all over the place. This is in the Shenandoah Valley, Fisher's Hill. This map is a little bit disconcerting because it's oriented with south to the south to the top and north to the bottom. Actually, Union forces defeated Jubal Early here under Union forces under Phil Sheridan. This was a map produced by Oltmans just after the battle. They defeated Jubal Early. He retreated 70 miles down the valley, which would be up as we're looking at this. And that opened up the Phil Sheridan basically decimating the Shenandoah Valley the same way that Sherman did as he marched from Atlanta to the sea. A little bit of hydro. We're worried about the Tennessee River, how far they can bring their gunboats down and transport. This is, once again, pilot notes for the Tennessee River stating the stages of water. They had They had the water at one place, and if it's reading that so much there, what was it reading at all these other locations? So they could plan operations, whether or not they wanted to take their boats down the river to attack further fortifications or to make further incursions into the Southern Territory. And this is the Battle of Fort Fisher, which is Wilmington. This was the final major naval battle of the war. These pictures were actually produced by John Bradford, who then, instead of Clarence Findle, was accompanying Admiral David Dixon Porter as the commanding officer of this particular battle. January 15th, 1865. This is and this led to the fall of Wilmington when they finally ended up taking Fort Fisher. Okay, best and the brightest. These are some of the guys that made things go, shall we say. Luminaries in the Coast Survey, Civilian, Navy, and Army. Keep in mind, the Coast Survey served as a technical school for Army and Navy officers, providing training in topography, geodesy, hydrography, and cartography. It also provided early career opportunities for command and management for military and naval officers. Coast surveyors, up in the upper right, Henry Lawrence Whiting. He was our best topographer, actually worked for the Coast Survey for 57 years, died in the saddle. Charles Anton Schott, a mathematician, geodesist, geophysicist, and a climatologist, but he was the chief mathematician of the Coast Survey, chief geodesist, and also he was, I put geophysicist, yeah, he's the guy that first studies of magnetic deviation, the change of direction of a compass while it's in a steel ship, if you will. Charles Sanders Peirce, considered one of the greatest American philosophers, polymath, meaning he was good at a lot of stuff, mathematician, physicist, psychologist, etc. Also a draft dodger. He actually went into the Coast Survey asking Bates, will this keep me out of the front lines, basically. But anyway, he's still a pretty smart guy. And Benjamin Peirce was his father, Harvard professor, mathematician, head of Coast Survey longitude operations, became the third superintendent of the Coast Survey in 1867 after Bates passed away. Okay, a couple of Army guys from the Coast Survey. John Altmans. He's the only guy that really looks like a field guy here to me in these pictures. But anyway, he died of wound complications, basically suffered at the Battle of New Orleans. George D. Wise, really interesting. I've never found anything on him after the Civil War. He'd been a Coast Survey topographer before the war, but he became a Union quartermaster on the Mississippi River initially, procuring Army transports for the movement of the Union troops down the Mississippi. From that, he graduated to being ultimately in charge of all Union marine transportation and was responsible for the movements of over 400 vessels. He had a Navy bigger than the Navy. Samuel Gilbert, breveted brigadier general, died of TB contracted during the war. He actually was instrumental in keeping Kentucky in the Union and was involved in many of the actions West Virginia prior to becoming split off from Virginia. And during all this, they found time to form the National Academy of Sciences, 1863. That was a Coast Survey party. Basically, from left to right, you have Benjamin Peirce, Alexander Dallas Bache, his ally Joseph Henry, who was the good friend, the secretary, first secretary of the Smithsonian, Louis Agassiz from Harvard, who was a good friend of Bache and an ally, President Lincoln. Henry Wilson is the senator, the short senator. Charles Henry Davis, naval officer, probably the most scientific naval officer of the 19th century. And then Benjamin Apthorpe Gould, who was a astronomer and geodesist with the Coast Survey as well at that time. Henry Wilson, he was made fun of because he went out to view the First Battle of Manassas, and when the Union forces were defeated, he basically rode a jackass all the way back to Washington, D.C., which a lot of people call the Great Skedaddle part of that. Navy officers, Admiral John Dahlgren, been a Coast Surveyor for 3 years. David Dixon Porter for 7 years. Charles Henry Davis, 3 years, and then became head of the Nautical Almanac Office. John Mayfitt, Confederate States Navy, 15 years. Then for the Army, we have General Joseph E. Johnston, who actually headed the Confederate Army before Robert E. Lee, and then was the last Confederate general to, well, I'm not sure he was the last, but he surrendered after Lee. Major General Ambrose P. Hill, there's Fort A.P. Hill down the 95 here. He worked for the Coast Survey for 6 years as head of the drawing division. Major General EOC Ord, Fort Ord, California, if any of you are familiar with that. 3 years triangulation. Then Major General Andrew Atkins Humphreys, 6 years on the survey as head of, as he was called the assistant in charge of the office, which is basically the deputy chief of the Coast Survey. After the Civil War, he became the head of Army Engineers for 13 years before he died.